A listener note, this episode contains references to adult content and language, and contains material that some might find offensive. It's February 1992 on the outskirts of Waco, Texas, and a UPS truck rumbles down a dirt path, reaches a gate, and comes to a stop. Larry Gilbreth, the UPS delivery man, shifts the truck into park. He glances out the window, noticing the winter sky fading into twilight as he gazes at his final destination for the day. It's Mount Carmel Center. Gilbreth lets the engine idle, and soon a guard comes out to greet him. Gilbreth has been making deliveries to Mount Carmel for months now, but the place still puts him on edge. The people here treat him well enough, but they guard their compound like it's some kind of fortress. The guard at the gate carries a shotgun. All around the property, what looked like manned observation posts. And one afternoon, Gilbreth even saw men running drills in camouflage fatigues. He had to wonder, what kind of Christian community is this? Now, with his truck idling, Gilbreth sees the guard unlocking the gate. The guard then waves him through. Gilbreth drives up the main cluster of buildings. He climbs out and walks around to the back of his truck. He grabs a couple packages and spots a large box on the top shelf addressed to David Koresh. As Gilbreth stretches up and grabs it, the box tilts, nearly falling off the ledge, and then several round black objects spill out. They fall and clank against the metal floor. Gilbreth looks down at his feet and goes rigid with fear. He's surrounded by a half-dozen hand grenades. His mind screams at him to run, but his body remains frozen. His heart pounds and he closes his eyes, but nothing happens. He squints at the grenades, his breath heavy, then he reaches down and gingerly picks one up. It's a hollow casing and surprisingly light in his hand. Gilbreth exhales in relief. He quickly gathers the casings, stuffs them back into the box, and carries everything to Mount Carmel's front door, but there's no way he's going to knock for a signature. Gilbreth drops them there, then jumps into his truck and pulls it into gear. He avoids eye contact with the guard as he drives out, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Soon, he's on his way back home. Gilbreth pulls up to his house and walks inside. There he finds his wife, Deborah, in the kitchen. With one look at his face, she knows something's wrong. Larry, what's happened? You remember what I've been saying about those people, the ones up at Mount Carmel? What happened? I was taking a box off the shelf, and it opens up and a bunch of grenades fall out. Grenades? My Lord, Larry, you could have been killed. That's what I thought. It turns out they were just empty shells or something, but God, it scared me to death. Okay, that does it. I'm calling the sheriff. Now hold on, Deb. I don't know if we want to get involved in this business. What if they find out we called the cops? Larry, these people are right on our doorstep. I'm calling the sheriff, and I'm doing it right now. Okay, all right, you're right. Call the sheriff, and then tell him I'll answer whatever questions he has. Deborah makes a phone call, and Gilbreth starts to think again about the men at Mount Carmel, the way they crawled commando style across the prairie, like they were getting ready for battle. His body suddenly goes tense, and his forehead feels damp. He wonders, what are those lunatics planning out there? He shakes his head and looks at Deborah. She's right. Something awful could happen in Waco. And whatever it is, they need to try and stop it. American Scandal is sponsored by the new Audible original Bad Republican by Meghan McCain. In her debut audio memoir, Meghan McCain gives a first-hand look into the life of the conservative rebel and departing co-host of The View. You'll hear what it's like to grow up as the daughter of an American icon and to mourn his loss very publicly just 1 year into her tenure as co-host of America's most-watched daytime talk show. Her memoir also reveals how she handled attacks from the U.S. president and her thoughts on cancel culture, dating, and how our country treats new mothers. It's unsparingly honest, deeply relatable, and highly entertaining. Go beyond what you know about Meghan McCain from TV and your newsfeed. Visit audible.com/badrepublican and listen now.
We get support from the new podcast, Hemingway's Picasso. Stephen Coe lived many lives. He was an NFL journeyman, a male model, and one of the most well-connected smugglers in 1980s Miami. Coe collected many souvenirs from his adventures, but his most treasured bounty, a beautiful ceramic crafted by Pablo Picasso and gifted to Ernest Hemingway at the author's Cuban home. So the story goes. Lost during the Cuban Revolution, the artwork resurfaced when Coe took it as payment for a drug run financed by the notorious Pablo Escobar. Coe passed away in 2018, passing the piece down to his son, Stevie. Stevie feels he needs to complete his father's mission of selling this piece and telling Steve's cinematic life story. Is the Picasso authentic or a fraud? Was Steve Coe a big talker or a real deal smuggler? Listen to new episodes of Hemingway's Picasso every Monday wherever you get your podcasts.
From Wondery, I'm Lindsey Graham, and this is American Scandal. By the early 90s, David Koresh had gained almost complete control over the Branch Davidian community at Mount Carmel. A few members had fled the community and spoken out against Koresh, but most of the Branch Davidians were drawn into Koresh's apocalyptic worldview and ready to make the ultimate sacrifice for their Messiah. That would mean going head-to-head with the ATF, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. ATF agents opened an investigation into Mount Carmel, and the more they dug, the more they learned about David Koresh's massive buildup of weapons. The agency began to view Koresh as an imminent threat, and that set the stage for a large-scale confrontation between the two sides. This is episode 3, Ranch Apocalypse. It's a hot fall day in 1991, and outside Waco, Texas, David Thibodeau is applying beige paint on a new building at Mount Carmel Center. As he glides his paintbrush along the wall, he feels something on his leg. He looks down, sees a fire ant crawling up his bare calf. He jumps, swats it away, and sighs. On days like this, he wonders how he found himself living in Central Texas. Thibodeau is in his early 20s. He's heavy-set, with long brown hair and gray-blue eyes. He's the drummer in David Koresh's rock band, and he and Koresh first met in Los Angeles at a guitar center. Thibodeau initially had some reservations about Koresh, especially when Koresh handed him a business card with a strange name. It listed his company as Messiah Productions. Still, it wasn't long before Thibodeau grew fascinated by Koresh's teachings. Here was the deep sense of purpose that had always been missing from his life. So he packed up his drum set and meager belongings and moved to Mount Carmel. At first, Thibodeau was shocked by the extremes of life at Mount Carmel. Their practices were unusual, to say the least. There were the underage girls and spouses of other men who Koresh had taken as his wives. There was the fact that Thibodeau and other men were expected to practice celibacy and the restrictive diet that sometimes felt like starvation. And then there was the flock of followers that offered utter and complete devotion to a man they believe is their Messiah. But despite having some reservations, Thibodeau had begun to feel like he's finally in the right place. He's surrounded by people with a sense of purpose who know how to live a disciplined life, a life that he's trying to adopt, even if that means painting a building in the hot sun, attacked by ants. As Thibodeau reflects on his time at Mount Carmel, he hears someone approaching. Thibodeau looks up and sees Koresh walking toward him with a smile on his face. Hey, Thibodeau, let me bend your ear for a minute. Thibodeau sets down his paintbrush and greets Koresh with a quick, excited wave. He loves how Koresh seems like just one of the guys. Fun, loves music, even if he's a preacher. But by the look on Koresh's face, he can tell there's something important to talk about. Absolutely, David, what's up? I've been thinking about something. He pauses and looks away as he weighs his words. How would you like to marry Michelle? Thibodeau is stunned. He knows that Koresh means Michelle Jones, the 16-year-old sister of Koresh's wife, Rachel. But Thibodeau also knows the two are more than just in-laws. The girl is also the mother of 3 of Koresh's children. What? No, David, what are you saying? You know Mark Bro has been trying to stir up the police against me. Says I'm running a harem, beating the children, like I've ever paddled any of them too hard. So what does that have to do with me and Michelle? Well, if people come snooping around, I need some cover. I don't need them wondering if Michelle's kids are mine. Thibodeau knows that Koresh has fathered more than a dozen children at Mount Carmel, sometimes with underage girls like Michelle. We'll get her parents to say, okay, you marry her, and then everything looks just fine if the police come by. And so, other guys here, they've helped me out like this before. I don't know, David, why me? I like Michelle, but I'm not ready to get married to anyone. Relax, it's not a real marriage, just paperwork. You'd still be sleeping solo in the men's dorm. Thibodeau winces. It's been incredibly difficult. Koresh enforces a rule of celibacy among all the men at Mount Carmel. At this point, Thibodeau feels like he's already given up plenty for his leader. I'm sorry, David. This is crazy. I'm just not cut out for marriage. Koresh looks Thibodeau dead in the eyes. Thibodeau, you're never going to fit in here if you don't get with the program. The waters are rising. All of us are making sacrifices. Thibodeau pauses, the Texas sun beating down on him. Maybe he should take the plunge. Maybe it's time to buckle down and commit to something for once. He's been looking for structure and discipline. He looks back at Koresh. Okay, David, I'll do it. Good. You have made the right choice. I'll go tell Michelle. As Koresh walks away, Thibodeau feels the weight of this new reality sinking in. It's a reality his instincts tell him to run from. But whenever he considers leaving Mount Carmel, he thinks about how lost he'd feel without David Koresh and his teachings. He's already spent enough time chasing dreams and ending up with nothing. Koresh may sometimes be unhinged, controlling, but at least he's building something that will last. It's February 27th, 1992. Joyce Sparks knocks sharply on the front door at Mount Carmel. She's flanked by 2 sheriff's deputies whose eyes are hidden by mirrored sunglasses. Sparks is a social worker with the Texas Department of Child Protective Services. She's in her mid-30s with blonde hair and a disarming smile. Yesterday, Sparks had an unsettling phone call with a man named Mark Bro. He was calling all the way from Australia. Bro said he was a former member of what he called the cult at Mount Carmel, and he recounted horrific stories about the way the children were treated at the compound. Sparks was shocked, so she came out to see for herself as soon as she could. The door opens, and standing there is a woman in her early 20s with long blonde hair. She eyes Sparks and the deputies with distrust. Sparks introduces herself. She explains they've received a complaint and needs to speak with some of the children, and also wants to talk with a man named David Koresh. The woman says her name is Rachel Koresh, and her husband, David, is in California right now. She suggests Sparks should return some other time. Sparks shakes her head. Unfortunately, that isn't an option. Rachel hesitates in the doorway, and then she turns and leads Sparks and the deputies inside. They head down a hallway and into a large room with wooden tables. Rachel explains that this is the community's cafeteria. They can talk with the kids here. Rachel Koresh then leaves the room and soon returns with a handful of young kids. Their eyes go wide when they spot the deputies. Sparks asks Rachel for a few minutes alone with the children. Rachel frowns, but leaves the room once again. One by one, Sparks talks gently with each child, trying to learn if there's any truth to Bro's accusations. She finds the kids skittish, strangely quiet, but all of them deny they've been abused, and they say that none of the other children are mistreated either. The last child she interviews is a boy with blonde hair that runs past his shoulders. He says his name is Cyrus. Sparks smiles and asks how old he is. 6, he says, but he'll be 7 soon. Sparks recalls what Bro said about Cyrus in particular, that this boy is David Koresh's son, and he's treated worst of all. She asks Cyrus if he's ever been hurt or denied food, but Cyrus just shakes his head without saying a word. Sparks doesn't see any visible signs of physical abuse. She searches his face, wishing she could read the boy's mind. He stays quiet, and she realizes there's nothing more she can learn for now. It's time to leave. One of the deputies brings Rachel back into the room. Sparks thanks her for her time. She says she'll come back another day to talk with David Koresh and maybe with some of the other families. But as she walks back to her car, Sparks stops. She feels unsettled. Maybe she shouldn't leave just yet. Maybe there's more to uncover. She still feels suspicious, but her hands are tied without concrete evidence. She'll have to return as soon as she can and meet this David Koresh face to face. It's July 30th, 1992, on a quiet residential street in Waco, Texas. ATF Special Agent Davy Aguilera and his partner approach a small home with a sloping driveway. It belongs to a man named Henry McMahon. McMahon is a licensed arm dealer known to have sold weapons to David Koresh and the Branch Davidians. Aguilera has short, dark hair and powerful shoulders that strain against his suit jacket. He's a Marine Corps veteran, and he's been with the ATF for about 5 years. He's a weapons expert, and that helps explain why he's here today, learning more about David Koresh. For months now, Aguilera has been investigating Koresh. It all started when he got a call from the McLennan County Sheriff's Office. The sheriff said that a local UPS driver had given a troubling report. He delivered grenade casings to a religious community east of Waco. He also described paramilitary exercises and armed guards on the property. The sheriff also said that the community's leader, David Koresh, had been charged with attempted murder a while back. The sheriff didn't know what Koresh was up to this time, but he did mention the locals referred to the Davidian compound as Ranch Apocalypse. Aguilera's stomach had tightened when he'd heard the phrase. He wondered if Koresh and his followers were some sort of doomsday cult, stockpiling weapons and waiting to strike. Since that call, it's only gotten worse. Aguilera found shipping records that show Koresh ordered large quantities of black gunpowder and powdered aluminum. Those are not illegal in their own right, but it's clear Koresh now has everything he needs to make functional, highly illegal grenades. And grenades only seem to be part of the equation. Judging from the parts Koresh has ordered, there's evidence he may be converting legal AR-15s into fully automatic rifles. If there are hundreds of illegal weapons and explosives like these at Mount Carmel, and there's proof of violent intent, Koresh could be locked away for years. But at this point, Aguilera is still building his case. He needs more information. Better yet, proof. Aguilera checks his watch. They're right on time for the scheduled interview. He knocks on the door, and it's answered by a man in his early 30s with a thin mustache. McMahon welcomes the agents into his living room. As they enter, Aguilera sees stacks of paperwork laid out on the coffee table. McMahon explains he's already gathered the records they asked for. Aguilera's partner begins poring over the transaction records, and Aguilera starts questioning McMahon. At first, the arms dealer is friendly. He says that he met Koresh in the fall of 1990. Koresh didn't seem to know much about guns back then, but he's a good student, and now he's probably more of an expert than McMahon himself. Aguilera frowns. He asks what Koresh intends to do with all the guns McMahon sold him, more than 200 semi-automatic rifles. It's then that McMahon seems to bristle. Koresh is just buying guns as an investment, he says defensively. The ATF should know what this is all about. If Bill Clinton is elected president, he's going to ban semi-automatic weapons. So Koresh is just making a smart financial move. He'll be able to resell the guns at a huge profit. Aguilera is about to press the arms dealer further when his partner interrupts. He noticed something strange. A number of parts for AR-15s are missing from McMahon's inventory. Where did those end up, he asked. McMahon swallows hard. He says that for the time being, Koresh is storing the parts for him. Aguilera gives him a skeptical look. McMahon excuses himself, says he'll grab some additional paperwork from the back room. Aguilera pages through some of the records while he waits. When he looks up, McMahon is standing over him, a cordless phone in his hand. He says he has David Koresh on the line, and Koresh would be happy to have the agents out to Mount Carmel. Aguilera's eyes go wide. Koresh is the last person he wants to talk to right now. It's way too early. Koresh could simply hide or disassemble the weapons before a scheduled visit, or he could even plan an ambush. No, Aguilera first needs to build a watertight case, one that allows the ATF to take swift and decisive action, and it needs to be on their terms. Until then, he's not ready to meet David Koresh. As the two agents walk back to the car, Aguilera knows he has to move fast. Koresh knows they're on his trail. To stop him, Aguilera needs to show that the Davidian leader is doing something illegal, building weapons, planning something violent. But it's this last part, what Koresh might do with his arsenal, that worries Aguilera most of all. In the small town of Fox Lake, Illinois, Joe Glinowitz was a hometown hero and 30-year veteran of the local police department. On September 1st, 2015, just 1 month from retirement, he was found dead outside an abandoned cement plant, shot in the chest twice at close range. While the town and Joe's family mourned his passing, hundreds of police officers launched a manhunt to find his killer. After weeks of searching, the lead investigator discovered chilling secrets about Joe, the local police department, and the village of Fox Lake. These were secrets that, once uncovered, would put the town in the national spotlight and haunt them for years to come. Wondery's shocking true crime podcast, Over My Dead Body, is back for a 3rd season with a story about corruption, betrayal, and the secrets of a fallen hero. Follow Over My Dead Body Season 3, Fox Lake, on Apple Podcasts, or you can listen early and ad-free by subscribing to Wondery Plus in Apple Podcasts or the Wondery app. It's mid-December 1992, and just before dawn in Melbourne, Australia, the ringing of a telephone breaks the silence in a dark bedroom. It jolts Mark Bro from his sleep. He turns over and sees that his wife, Elizabeth Baranyai, has picked it up. She turns to Bro and covers the mouthpiece with one hand. She says it's a call from America, someone named Davy Aguilera with the ATF. As soon as he hears this, Bro is wide awake. He and Baranyai have been trying for years to get the government to take action against David Koresh. The call from the ATF can mean only one thing. Koresh is finally under investigation, and by an agency powerful enough to take him down. Bro eagerly takes the receiver. This is Mark Bro. Hello, sir. This is Agent Aguilera. I'm calling to ask you some questions about David Koresh. Yeah, I've been waiting for a long time for someone in the government to take my warning seriously. Bro sees Bernier. I shoot him a hopeful glance. Well, Mr. Bro, I'm glad we're speaking now. If you don't mind, I'd like to get right to it. How long has it been since you've lived at Mount Carmel? More than 3 years, but trust me, I have a good memory. That's noted. And what was your relationship to David Koresh during that time? Well, Vernon, David Koresh, he was my spiritual leader, and I was sort of his right-hand man. We talked a lot about God and his plans for the group. He told me a lot that he'd never tell anyone else. I see. And did Koresh ever talk about or reveal what kind of weapons he was stockpiling? Well, you got to understand, I'm not much of a gun person, but I can tell you there were only a few guns at the beginning. But then he started ramping up for what he thought was the end of days. I know he was buying more and more. Mr. Bro, we have reason to believe that David Koresh is in possession of more than 200 semi-automatic weapons. He's even bought what might be a grenade launcher. But we need evidence of illegal weapons to get a warrant. Bro sits up in his bed, a look of shock spread across his face. You're telling me a grenade launcher is legal? Well, yes, perfectly legal. The same with semi-automatics, but Koresh might be modifying his guns to make them fully automatic. And that would be illegal without the proper registration. Possession of explosive devices is also a crime. And of course, any illegal actions that they might be planning would be of grave concern to the ATF. Well, I definitely heard David say they were going to make automatic weapons. And he did talk about learning to build explosives. That's helpful, Mr. Bro. We can definitely use that for our warrant. We also have a neighboring rancher, an Army vet, who says he's heard automatic gunfire coming from Mount Carmel. Bro clenches his jaw and considers what all this means. If Koresh has all those weapons, then his Armageddon must be just around the corner. There's a moment of silence on the other end of the line. When Aguilera speaks, his tone is even more serious. Mr. Bro, tell me more about this Armageddon. Bro lays it all out. He explains that Koresh believes he's the new Messiah, and he's preparing for the end of times and a battle with the U.S. government. He has complete control over his followers, and those followers are willing to die for him. Bro's voice grows stern as he warns the federal agent. I would be very careful about trying to arrest Koresh at Mount Carmel. You gotta lure him out somehow. We'll take that into consideration. Thank you for your time, Mr. Bro. I will be in touch. Bro hangs up and exhales heavily. He takes his wife's hand and says that finally all their hard work is paying off. He should feel jubilant, but as Bro lies back down, he feels anxiety coursing through his body. He pictures the arsenal that Aguilera described and imagines it in Koresh's hands. He certainly hopes the ATF will pay attention to his warning. It's January 1993, about a month later. Special Agent Davy Aguilera is standing outside the tidy office of Joyce Sparks. Sparks is the social worker who's been looking into allegations of child abuse at Mount Carmel. And while that's well outside the ATF's scope, Aguilera is hoping Sparks may have picked up some useful intelligence during her visits. Aguilera wants to understand every aspect of life at Mount Carmel. That, he hopes, will help predict what exactly Koresh intends to do with his arsenal. Sparks gestures for Aguilera to take a seat. She says that she interviewed the children about a year ago, and even though the place was unsettling, she found no evidence the children had been abused. She wanted to keep the case open, but their bosses decided otherwise. Even today, she still worries about those kids. And really, she worries about everyone at Mount Carmel. Aguilera raises an eyebrow. What makes her so worried? She bites her lip before replying. There's something very wrong with David Koresh. She's glad Aguilera's here because Koresh told her something quite disturbing. He said that the world was coming to an end, and that when he reveals himself, whatever that means, well, let's just say something very big and terrifying is going to happen. And Koresh told her that in that moment, all non-believers would suffer. Aguilera leans forward in his chair. Did Koresh say when this event would happen? Sparks replies no, but it seemed a ways off. Koresh was talking like it was some distant fantasy. Aguilera nods thoughtfully, but he isn't so sure. It's time to speak with his superiors. The ATF needs agents keeping a closer eye on Mount Carmel. They need to understand just how imminent a threat this really is. It's January 10th, 1993. A dust devil whips across the fields of Mount Carmel, and David Koresh looks through a pair of binoculars at his neighbor's property. It's an old, rundown ranch house, but something strange is going on. Out front, there's a pair of new pickup trucks. The property's been empty, and only about a month ago, the neighbor said he had no intention of renting the place. But now, for some reason, this derelict ranch house has a couple of shiny trucks out front. Earlier, Koresh sent a few of his followers to meet the newcomers. They tried to give a friendly welcome, came bearing a cold six-pack and fresh pizza. But according to his followers, a burly guy opened the door and didn't invite them in. He just accepted the pizza and beer with a quick thank you, and then firmly shut the door. Maybe nobody taught the guy manners, Koresh thinks, but more likely, his new neighbors had something to hide. Afterward, Koresh did some digging. He checked the registration on the pickup trucks. All the vehicles were registered to the same address, way over in Houston, all the way across the state. Koresh lowers the binoculars. Beside him are two of his closest followers, Steve Schneider and David Thibodeau. Koresh hands the binoculars to Schneider so he can have a look. Schneider doesn't mince words. He says that the newcomers are definitely government agents. It's just not clear who they're working for. Schneider suggests they might be with immigration, but Koresh shakes his head. No, sure, some members of the community are not American, and they have expired visas, but he can't picture immigration agents going to this length, staking out the compound, renting a whole property, and for what, busting a few people on expired tourist visas? No, Koresh says. These guys must have bigger fish to fry. It's January 17th, 1993. ATF Special Agent Robert Rodriguez walks through the ranch house he and the other undercover agents are living in. It's loaded with surveillance equipment, all trained on the property across the way, Mount Carmel. In the living room, Rodriguez grabs a custom AR-15 rifle from the gun rack near the monitors. Today, he's going to visit Mount Carmel. The Branch Davidians invited him to visit, and together they're going to practice on the group's shooting range. Rodriguez hops in his truck and makes a short drive to the compound. At the gate, he gives the guard his undercover name, Robert Gonzalez. The guard waves him through. Rodriguez was nervous when he got this assignment. The higher-ups said Agent Aguilera needed first-hand evidence to build a case for a warrant. Rodriguez wasn't sure he'd be convincing going undercover. He'd have to spend some time with a bunch of cult members, pretending to be interested in their crazy talk. But it's gone okay so far, and he feels like he's gaining their trust. Why else would Koresh invite him over to the gun range? Still, Rodriguez can't say he's thrilled to spend an afternoon firing assault rifles with a man who thinks he's the son of God. Rodriguez steps out of his truck, and he hears a steady volley of gunshots coming from just over the rise. He slings the AR-15 over his shoulder and makes his way towards the noise. Rodriguez heads to an open field where he spots Koresh holding a semi-automatic rifle. All at once, he feels his senses going on high alert. The religious leader turns and waves him over with a smile. But there's something eerie about it. Koresh wears that same expression when he invites Rodriguez to Bible studies. Rodriguez hopes Koresh will skip the Bible talk today. All he wants to hear about is something about illegal guns, something he can actually use for Aguilera's case. Koresh fires his last rounds at a newly hung target. Then he invites Rodriguez to take a few shots. Rodriguez squints and takes aim. He tries to forget all his training and look like an amateur. Ever since he met Koresh, he's been playing dumb, asking questions about guns. He hopes Koresh will screw up and reveal something he shouldn't. Rodriguez feels Koresh watching him closely as he purposely sends a few rounds high off the target. Koresh pats him on the back and tells him he might want to consider using the scope on the top of the gun. Rodriguez tries to laugh, but he says he just bought the thing. He offers the rifle to Koresh and asks if Koresh wants to try it out, see what he thinks. Rodriguez is hopeful this will lead to something. There's nothing like swapping guns at a shooting range to get people bragging about their own firepower. Kind of illegal guns they're itching to use if they ever get the chance. Koresh grabs the weapon. Rodriguez watches as he sights in and nails the bullseye repeatedly. This guy is a serious marksman. Then Koresh pivots and aims at stones far off the prairie. 3 quick pops. He doesn't miss a single one. Koresh has a strange look in his eye when he hands the gun back to Rodriguez. This is a sniper rifle, Robert. Very dangerous weapon. You should be careful. Right then, Rodriguez has the terrifying feeling that Koresh sees right through him. He's sure he's imagining it, but still, he's got to get out of here before he cracks. He thanks Koresh, says he needs to get home. He's got to keep studying for class at the nearby technical school. He promises to come for Bible talk sometime this week. Koresh nods his head, and his eyes turn cold and steely. Sure thing, Robert, he says, his voice disturbingly cheerful. We look forward to having you back soon.
This year marks the 20th anniversary of the attacks of September 11th, but I don't want to talk about that day. I want to talk about the next day, and every day after that. I'm Dan Taberski. I'm the host of the podcast 912. Hear stories about how 9/11 the day became 9/11 the idea. 912 is available now on Amazon Music.
It's late January 1993. Special Agent Davy Aguilera steps out of the biting wind and enters a cavernous airplane hangar. The hangar is northeast of Waco, and inside, government agents are clustered in various corners. They're murmuring among themselves and poring over aerial photos of the Branch Davidian compound. For the next few weeks, this will be ATF's command post for the action against Mount Carmel. Aguilera has spent the past 7 months putting together an affidavit, one that summarizes his investigation. He's nearly finished, and soon the ATF will present it to the federal judge so they can get warrants to search Mount Carmel and arrest David Koresh. Aguilera has documented the real threat posed by the Branch Davidians. They have everything they need to manufacture fully automatic weapons and to build explosive devices. By interviewing people like Mark Bro, they've established Koresh's extremist views, and they can prove that he's getting ready for a showdown with authorities. Aguilera spots another special agent who's here to help lead the action at Mount Carmel. The agent fills him in on some crucial backstory. Higher-ups at the ATF decided they shouldn't try to arrest David Koresh while he's away from Mount Carmel. There are just too many factors outside of their control. Koresh rarely seems to leave the compound, and his timing is unpredictable. Also, it's crucial that they execute both the arrest warrant and the search warrant at the same time, because if word gets back to Mount Carmel that Koresh has been arrested, the ATF will lose the element of surprise for the search. Aguilera understands the logic, but he still feels nervous. He can't stop thinking about Mark Bro's warning that there could be a catastrophe at Mount Carmel. Luckily, Aguilera found old evidence that should greatly help the ATF. The sheriff's department had evidence of a meth lab on the property, and a number of Davidians currently living at Mount Carmel have drug charges on their records. So with drugs now a factor, the ATF has a trick up its sleeve. It can now use military resources for any action at Mount Carmel. Aguilera asks the ATF special agent how the partnership with the military is coming along. The agent says he's not sure they'll get the Bradley tanks they've requested, but it's very likely they'll get helicopters from the National Guard, and the U.S. Army Special Forces should be able to help train the ATF troops. Of course, the team will give Koresh a chance to submit to arrest, but if he and the Davidians won't back down, the ATF needs to be prepared for a fight. Then the agent gives Aguilera a stern look. He asks if Aguilera is sure the warrants from the judge will come through. They put a lot of time and resources into this mission. Now that the military is involved, everything has to come off without a hitch. The agent lowers his voice and steps towards Aguilera. He asks, is it true they do not have hard evidence of illegal weapons? Aguilera swallows hard, but he stands his ground. Yes, that's technically true, he says, but all the necessary components for illegal weapons are on site at Mount Carmel. More importantly, there's no way a judge could ignore all the warning signs. Aguilera says they should have a warrant soon, probably within a couple weeks. The agent gives a curt nod. He says he's about to brief the team on the current plan for the mission. Aguilera can sit in. Soon, the two head to a makeshift conference area. Aguilera takes a seat on a folding chair toward the back. The other agent addresses the room and explains that the element of surprise is the most crucial aspect of the plan. It seems likely the Davidian men are going to be working on the foundation for a new building. That means they'll be distracted and away from their weapons. But that doesn't mean we can just roll up in a SWAT van, he says. Instead, they have a Trojan horse, 2 of them in fact, a pair of Texas cattle trailers covered with tarps. They're large enough to hide about 70 agents. Once the trucks stop, agents will roll out, weapons drawn, and announce their presence. Hopefully the show force will be enough to make Koresh surrender. If not, the agents need to be ready. In the back row, Aguilera's heart begins racing. He can picture this plan unfolding. It will be a terrifying day for everyone. It's early February 1993. The sound of a helicopter's rotors echoes off the building at Mount Carmel. David Thibodeau looks nervously up at the sky. This isn't the first time a helicopter has flown over Mount Carmel. The community heard one last week, too. But David Koresh believes a government attack is coming. It's not a matter of if, he says, it's a matter of when. So on Koresh's orders, Thibodeau and others began important work on the main building. They opened up the walls and poured concrete between the drywall. This is all part of an effort to make their home bulletproof. Still, in other ways, life at Mount Carmel has continued as normal. Just last week, they started building a tornado shelter. That's protection from Mother Nature, not Uncle Sam. As Thibodeau stares at the sky, the helicopter banks far over a neighboring field. Then it races forward for another pass over Mount Carmel. Thibodeau watches the children make a game of it. They're aiming imaginary rifles into the sky, pretending they have the power to bring the evil machine out of the clouds. Thibodeau sees his friend Julie Martinez standing at the edge of the field. She's watching her children pretend to be soldiers. He smiles sadly. Thibodeau has had a crush on Martinez since she arrived here over a year ago. He appreciates that she didn't come for the religion, but because she was at the end of her rope with a bad drug habit. Her mother lives at Mount Carmel, and so she could live here rent-free and have all her children with her. Thibodeau approaches, his eyes on the children. Hey, Julie. Your kids seem to be handling all this better than I am. Oh, don't worry. My mom says David's been talking about this battle with the government for years, but I don't understand why it's all more likely to happen this time. I don't know. There's helicopters in the sky. These guys moving in down the road? Well, it's got me a little freaked out. Martinez shrugs, smiles. I say you've got more important things to work out, like how to celebrate next week. Thibodeau can't help but grin. He's turning 24 next week, and he's touched that Martinez remembered. Just then, David Koresh comes out in the yard, calls everyone in for a study session. Something about this sounds urgent, though. So Thibodeau and the others quickly file into the chapel. At the front of the chapel, David Koresh stands with a broad, otherworldly smile on his face. He looks possessed, almost rapturous. He begins to preach. We are the peculiar people spoken of in the Bible. The people that the world's powers will never understand. I tell you, it's good to have you peculiar people with me here today. There are a few appreciative laughs around the room, but suddenly Koresh's mood turns somber. Yes, we are the peculiar people, and the obliteration of our community is inevitable. Forces will come, but fear not them which kill the body. They are not able to kill the soul. Thibodeau's heart sinks, because once again Koresh is saying that their salvation lies in sacrifice. He watches his leader pace to the front of the room, holding his Bible in the air. What we have yet to know is how this will happen. Will God allow us to ascend to heaven without suffering an earthly death? Or will we all die violently? We'll soon find out. It'll be a hard fate we're facing, but let me tell you something. It's magnificent. Thibodeau looks around at the faces in the room. Men and women of all ages, races, and backgrounds. They're the closest thing to a community he's ever known. He looks at Julie Martinez and his friends Steve and Wayne, and his legal wife Michelle, who sits with her 3 children. And he faces a strong tug in his heart. If Koresh is right, and all these people are going to die, he may have to accept his fate and stand side by side with his community. He hopes he never has to make that decision, but it seems like the nightmare day is approaching, and he'll soon have to choose a side. Next, on American Scandal, the ATF launches its fateful raid on Mount Carmel. Government forces face off against David Koresh and his followers, and the outcome is nothing either side could have predicted. From Wondery, this is American Scandal. If you enjoyed this episode, I have 2 other podcasts you might like, American History Tellers and American Elections Wicked Game. Search for them and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Wondery.com, or wherever you're listening right now. If you're listening on a smartphone, tap or swipe over the cover art of this podcast. You'll find the episode notes, including some details you may have missed. You'll also find some offers from our sponsors. By supporting them, you'll help us offer this show to you for free. And if you'd like to hear more of American Scandal and other Wondery shows, in addition to getting early access and exclusive perks, you can subscribe to Wondery Plus. Go to Wondery.com/plus. That's Wondery.com/PLUS. We use many sources in writing our shows. 2 that were especially helpful for this episode are Waco, the Survivor's Story by David Thibodeau, and the CBS 48 Hours episode, Secrets of Waco. And just a quick note about our scenes. In most cases, we can't know exactly what was said, but everything in our show is based on historical research. American Scandal is hosted, edited, and executive produced by me, Lindsey Graham, for Airship. Sound designed by Derek Barrett. This episode is written by Michael Canyon-Meyer, edited by Christina Malsberger, produced by Gabe Riven. Executive producers are Stephanie Jens, Jenny Lauer-Beckman, and Hernan Lopez for Wondery.